Listen, I don't need to go into too much detail about the importance of winning conference matchups. You want to get as many victories as possible. That way, you have a shot at playing in the title game, hoisting up the championship trophy, thus also cementing your spot in the college football playoff. But on top of all those great conference matchups we're going to see, there are a lot of great non conference battles, and they're going to have a major effect on who gets into the college football playoff. And yeah, eventually I'll get back to doing my top 10 list for tight ends and safeties, position groups, coaches. We're going to do our rankings for all the Power Four conference coaches. But today, let's go through my top 10 non conference games that everyone should be paying attention to in 2024. Real quickly, if you're new to the channel, what up? My name is Cole Thompson. I talk college football daily. If this is the type of content you enjoy, smash that subscribe button, hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode of just saying it. And of course, make sure that you hit the comment section. What is your favorite non-conference matchup of 2024? Tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, college football fanatics everywhere about this channel, because we're on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking about our favorite sport. I'm on the race to become the #1 YouTuber talking college football. And this is going to be eventually the #1 college football community. If you want to be a part of the Mailbag Monday series or you have questions, email me, colethompsonwriting@gmail.com, link in the description down below, or slide in the DMs while you're following me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. Conference games are essential to team success, but there are some great non-conference matchups, and this is also going to have a major factor for conferences when it comes to representation in the postseason. A lot of people don't know what is going to eventually unfold with a dozen rosters now fighting for a finish spot in the dozen dance. So if you win a non-conference game against one conference where there's conversations of maybe they're too well represented or they're not represented enough, well, that strengthens your argument for more opportunities for your conference to have better representation. So that's why some of these games are also really essential. It may come down to one of these non-risque kind of matchups to where you say, well, that conference got the win, so they get an extra team in the playoff. That's why this is really important. Quickly, honorable mentions, Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's kind of flying under the radar right now. If they get a win against an Arkansas team, regardless of what Arkansas is, that still is really good for the Big 12 standings. Boise State versus Oregon. Let's just say Spencer Danielson and now Malachi Nelson pair together and they go into Autzen Stadium and they make it a battle. They may not win, but it will strengthen their case to be the group of 5 school that's represented. Florida versus UCF, that's going to be a must-see showcase depending on what happens with Florida. And if you haven't been paying attention to what's going on in Orlando, the Knights are surging right now to where they may actually be a front runner in the Big 12. Kansas State versus Tulane. You got to realize that last season, if Michael Pratt played against Ole Miss, we could be talking about Tulane having one of the biggest wins of 2023 and really altering the way that we viewed the SEC last year. That's going to be kind of the same case for Avery Johnson, Chris Kleiman, as they take on John Summerall and the Green Wave. A very underrated matchup, UNLV versus Kansas. UNLV just added in the quarterback from Holy Cross that's replacing Diego Paiva. Barry Odom is going to be a name that's mentioned for a lot of Power 4 head coaching jobs if he duplicates his success. And same with Brennan Marion. Kansas also, they're going to be implementing Jalen Daniels. How does this offense now look without having Andy Kolenicki there? Arizona State versus Texas State. Again, it's not the biggest matchup, but at the same time, when you're trying to clinch a spot in the college football playoff, any win over a Power 4 program will do wonders. And Texas State, they're sliping up for me, at least when it comes to their status among Group of 5 programs. TCU versus SMU, it's the Battle of the Iron Skillet. This is always a great game for anybody that has grown up in the state of Texas. So, yeah, they're not going to be a Big 12 versus AAC, but ACC versus Big 12, again, does numbers for one squad potentially getting an extra representative in the dance. Nebraska versus Colorado. A lot of people forgot that last season, Nebraska was favored in this game, and Colorado actually laid waste to the Huskers. And now you bring in Dylan Raiola. Maybe this is going to be an emulation of what used to be the Southwest Conference / Big 12. This could be really, really good. Or my bad, Big 8, Big 12. My apologies on that one. And Notre Dame versus Louisville. I'm just going to be completely transparent. You're going to see a lot of Notre Dame on this list. So if you hate Notre Dame, I don't know what else to tell you on this. 10, Alabama versus Wisconsin. The game's going to be in Camp Randall. It's an 11 o'clock kick. You got Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson on the call, which is going to be great. But this is also going to be the first real test in the Kalen DeBoer era. That's not an insult to anyone else, especially Alex Golish and USF, but That game's going to be in Bryant-Denny Stadium. This is going to be the first real matchup. The offensive line is really stable up front with the addition of Parker Brailsford, but the depth is where you have a little bit of question marks. They have two really good running backs, and they are going to be having Jalen Milroe back there, but this is also a very good defensive front for Wisconsin. And Luke Fickell's trying to emulate a brand new era of Badger football to where they're right back in the hunt alongside like Penn State, and they're surpassing Michigan State. They want to be known as a premier tier 2, upper echelon, bottom tier 1 roster in the Big Ten. And they could, especially with the guy that's leading the charge. They also upgraded at quarterback, in my opinion, with Tyler Van Dyke. He fits this offense for Phil Longo a lot better. He can sling it around the yard. He can make it look easy. I do think that this is going to be a matchup in favor of Alabama, but I will say, don't look now, but fourth quarter, you got to jump around playing. It's going to be a must-see showcase. And also, this could be a moment where we start to see Wisconsin where, yeah, they're not at Alabama's level, but they are better than advertised and maybe a sneaky roster that you want to monitor in the Big Ten moving forward. 9, Miami versus Florida, week 1, August 31st. This is a tale of two different teams. Miami, they're all in this year. And people like me, and there's a lot of other people that work in this industry, they're really high on the Hurricanes to not just make the college football playoff, but really establish themselves as being back in national relevancy. And then you have Florida, which is kind of getting a little bit of disrespect. I won't say that we need to put them in that conversation where another team I'm going to mention is, but they do have a roster with quality players. The offensive line is pretty decent. They have a veteran secondary. Graham Mertz is a very stable quarterback. He's not elite. He's above average, but he's not below average. He's just right there in the middle of the SEC. You know what you get. He's the mashed potatoes of the dish on every single course. But there are good resources around him to where, yeah, maybe he won't be a superstar like Cam Ward is supposed to be. Maybe he won't live up to the expectations with the transfer portal like Damian Martinez was or Simeon Barrow was. But he is good enough, especially with Shamir Dike, Trey Wilson, Elijah Badger comes on over from Arizona State. They have a good run game. This is going to be, I think, a tale of two testaments. Miami, they want to set the tone. Yes, we are here. We have arrived. We know that we are going to be a middle tier, a number 1 tier in the ACC. We're going to be a threat. And Florida, it's just kind of like, we want to set the tone too. We know that we're not going to be a playoff contender, but we do know that we're better than the 4.5 wins that FanDuel has us at this year. So it's in the swamp. It's going to be a really good showcase. Again, this is a rivalry between the Sunshine State programs. This could really, I think, set the tone for both these squads and the eventual results we see throughout the regular season. 8, Notre Dame versus USC, November 30th. Here's the deal. I don't care what anybody says about the future of college football. This is a rivalry that stays regardless. It is. It's one of the best matchups in the history of the sport over the last 3 decades, and anybody that wants to take this away is absolutely out of their mind. The reason why this is going to be a really interesting matchup is for Notre Dame. If they get this win and they get another win that's listed on here and one more win, I'll just say at Louisville, they're going to have 3 quality wins on their staff to where that might be enough to guarantee them a spot in the playoff. But also, we're going to know who Notre Dame is. We're going to know immediately what the Fighting Irish are in 2024 with the brand new offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, with a few new weapons like Chris Mitchell, with the quarterback and Riley Leonard that might be an upgrade over Sam Hartman, a stable defense. But we're also going to know what USC is and what they're going to have to work on going into 2025. They're going to have a defense that I think is a lot more well-equipped to take on teams of big-bodied and formidable front sevens because of that's what D'Anton Lynn was. I thought he was the best hire of the entire offseason. But also they're going to have an offense that I think is going to hit its stride with regardless of Diego Paiva, regardless of Miller Ross, whoever's the guy that wins the job. But what's going to be the missing link that needs to be refined in the Big Ten? Is it literally just going out and adding in more defensive players? Is it bolstering up your offensive line? Is it hiring a new offensive line coach? Is it hiring a new strength and conditioning coordinator? Like Lincoln Riley is going to use this game as kind of like a middle tier last piece to the evaluation chart to say, here's what we need to do to improve going into next season if we want to be legit contenders in the Big Ten. 7, Penn State versus West Virginia, August 31st. This game needs to be talked about more. And I'm going to say something that a lot of people are probably going to eye roll, but I don't really care. Why are we not talking more about West Virginia? Because of if you just look at this game last year and never saw another matchup with the Mountaineers, you would say, okay, well, yeah, of course, it's West Virginia. They probably went what 5-7. They went 4-8. Neil Brown got fired. They were dead last in the Big 12. Well, this was a game where they kind of kept things interesting in the first half. They were always trailing, but they never saw Penn State pull away until late in the fourth quarter. They scored like 17 points. Drew Aller got 2 touchdowns. And then after that, this was kind of like the wake up call that West Virginia needed in Happy Valley to go, okay, we got this under control. Now let's go ahead and build off that. They found a really good versatile weapon in Raheem White. They also have a Jakeem White. They have a really good running back in CJ Donaldson. Garrett Green, I think, has established himself. If you watch my top 10 video, you know I think he's a top 10 quarterback in college football this year. They're a good roster. They're really interesting. They went 9-4 last year. And there are some people, when you look at this defense, when you look at this offensive line, that are going to say, it's hard to not at least put West Virginia in the conversation of maybe a dark horse for the college football playoff. It's hard not to consider them in the running for a Big 12 title. And Penn State, as good as they are with what they're bringing in with Tom Allen replacing Manny Diaz, that's a really good upgrade, at least in terms of what could have been on the roster. Andy Koltnicki coming on over from Kansas with what he just did with Jason Bean, bringing the Jayhawks to 9-4. There's still question marks when it comes to this offense. There's a lot of question marks for James Franklin's roster going into 2024. Like, we think right now Penn State should be a playoff team because the schedule says so. But this game is going to be in Morgantown. And I can tell you what, West Virginia is coming for blood because they still feel disrespected after everything that they went through last year. And I don't know when they're going to garner it, but when they do, people are going to have to pay attention to the Mountaineers. They're going to mean business in 2024. And I think that Neil Brown has proven that he's the right guy. 6, Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. Again, I told you, you don't like Notre Dame, you're not going to like this list. They still show up again. This is the game that is going to kick off the season for many people because it's with ESPN College Game Day, so you're going to be watching everything in College Station. It's the start of a new era for Mike Elko, which is a good thing, I think, for Texas A&M. And the Aggies are one of those rosters where it's kind of fun because of we don't know what they are. Like on paper, they probably are better than what the 7.5 win total FanDuel says they are. But also, they still have to play in the SEC, and they're implementing a brand new offensive staff underneath Colin Klein. Connor Wegman's legit. If you've watched any bit of his film, I can promise you, you come away impressed with the kid from Cypress, Texas. He's got all the intangibles to be one of, if not the staple quarterback at the SEC. He just doesn't have the reps underneath him. And he would have had it last year and saved Jimbo Fisher's job if he doesn't get hurt in week 4. But this is going to be a team that is also implementing a brand new defensive front. And what do we know about Mike Elko? He is a mastermind of getting great defensive play from his front 7. They brought over Nick Scorton, the defensive player of the year in the Big 10. The other thing, this is a Notre Dame offense that is adding in a quarterback with Riley Leonard, some good weaponry, but they did lose both their tackles in Joe Alt and Blake Fisher. So how does that work week 1? And Mike Elko, the one thing that you can say about him as well is that he is going to have a heads up on what Riley Leonard is because he worked with him for the last 2 years. Like, that's an advantage. He coached at Notre Dame, so he knows what type of formula works for the Fighting Irish. He played against Mike Denbrock before, so he knows what type of formula is the type of offense that he likes to run, and he knows what type of quarterback Riley Leonard is. So Notre Dame may get the win. Texas A&M may put themselves on a show to where, yes, they are better than advertised, but either way, the best part about this game is that fan bases hate both of these programs without intent because they feel like they're cults. And so we kind of get to see what the actual pageantry of college football all is wrapped up into one. 5, Georgia versus Clemson. I hate these type of games because they're played at neutral site locations, and it sucks for fans. This has nothing to do with it being in the backyard of Atlanta. This has everything to do with the fact that it's Georgia versus Clemson. These are 2 really good high-profile programs. Do you know what the ambiance would be at Clemson, South Carolina, or in Athens, Georgia, at Sanford Stadium or Death Valley? Like, do you know what these would be? They'd be phenomenal. But instead, we have to play it in a must-see National Football League showcase, whatever. I don't really care. Georgia, as good as they are, they still have some question marks. And Clemson, for as many question marks as we have, still is pretty good. And if you don't believe me, Clemson still has like the 3rd best odds to win the ACC. even without going out in the transfer portal and adding in players. They added in some really good wide receivers, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore. If you talk to anybody on campus, they're very high on what they're going to bring. And they also think that Kate Klubnik, with another year under his belt working with Garrett Riley, that's going to do wonders. This is still a good defensive line. You may hate Dabo Swinney. You may think that he's cringy. You may think that he's weird. You may want to keep him away from your children and 6 feet away from schools. But like, the dude gets defense, and he's an offensive-minded coach. He understands how to recruit, and they got some really good players coming back, including Peter Woods and Barrett Carter. And so Georgia, which I think for many people, including yours truly, top 2 team in college football, they added in some really good pieces in the portal. But this may be a game where you say, maybe in the third quarter, okay, we feel good about our roster, but we definitely have some stuff we need to work on. There was a few years ago when these two went up against each other. JT Daniels played, and I went down to the wire, and Kirby afterwards said there's so much that we have to work on, because it was a very low-scoring game, and this was a team that many people thought was going to be must-see showcase. Is that what we see in Atlanta this time around? Is that what we're going to get? Because if there is a scenario where, yeah, Clemson and Georgia, this could be a really intriguing matchup, and not set the tone for either of these programs, but definitely bring some intrigue to the ACC and the SEC. 4, Tennessee versus NC State a week later in a similar neutral site location. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina, Bank of America Stadium. This is my favorite bowl game of the non-conference. It's not the best, but it's my favorite because I have an infatuation with both NC State and Tennessee. I love Raleigh, North Carolina. It's one of my favorite towns in all of college football. I love Knoxville. I'm an Alabama grad, and I absolutely love Knoxville. It is a phenomenal place. It is a great institution. And these are two programs that are going to really, I think, set the tone for how we view that college football scenario. See, remember when I told you earlier that there's going to be some games that are going to decide how many teams from a conference gets in? This is one of them. This may be the pinnacle of them, because Tennessee and NC State, they're both tier 2 squads in their respective conferences. They're both kind of flying under the radar, but nobody would be shocked to see a Nico Iamaleava-led roster with guys like Mikey Matthews and Holden Stays coming on in, eventually make their way to Atlanta. And NC State, adding in guys like Justin Jolly, adding in Noah Rogers, having Casey Compacion, adding in Grayson McCall, they bring over Waters from Duke. They may end up, again, being that team. You won't be surprised if they're playing in Charlotte for an ACC title game. And so this game may eventually determine, well, do we send 2 teams from the ACC to the conference? To the playoff. Do we send 5 teams from the SEC to the college football playoff? Because Tennessee won. They beat NC State, and NC State's playing in Charlotte again, or NC State won. But Tennessee, they handle business against everybody else, and now they're playing in Atlanta. This is one of those games where it doesn't seem to carry a lot of weight for most fans right now. But when everything is said and done, this may be a reason why the ACC actually gets better representation than what we initially thought going into 2024. 3, Florida State, Notre Dame, November 9th. Again, this is another one of those games where Florida State, I'm going to say this, Florida State's being disrespected right now. Like, I'm tired of hearing people say Florida's being disrespected, because they are, but Florida State went undefeated last year. They lost a lot of talent, but Mike Norvell went out and worked the transfer portal again. And I'm not just saying with DJ Uyunglele, like Roydell Williams comes on over, Malik Benson comes on over, Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia comes on over. They're a still good team. They may not be the favorites to win the ACC. They're not my favorites, but they definitely belong in that conversation, along with Clemson, along with NC State, along with North Carolina. Along with Miami. They do. And if they go play against Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, and DJU gets revenge, because let's remember, he lost to Notre Dame a few years ago. So this is a big game for him. If they go win this game, well, that's not only a marquee win from out of conference persona for Florida State, but also when they're able to go ahead and justify, what do we need to be in the college football playoff? Notre Dame might be that roster that's automatically pigeonholed in, but Florida State can knock them out. And then for Notre Dame, again, you win against Texas A&M, you win against USC, you win against Louisville, and you win against Florida State. People are going to argue Notre Dame needs to be in a conference. They need to do it. It's like people that argue that the college football playoff national championship needs to move to Saturday. Okay, then don't watch on a Monday night. You know you're going to, but don't watch on a Monday night. The same argument goes for Notre Dame. They don't have to, because nobody's going to kick them out. They get 4 quality wins with this schedule. Yeah, it's going to be really hard to say at 11-1, 10-2, they at least are not in the conversation. Doesn't mean that they're guaranteed a spot in the postseason, but they are at least in the running for it. Number two, LSU versus USC. I don't think we give enough flack to LSU the way that we do USC because both these squads had top two picks. Both these squads had the Heisman Trophy winner. Both these squads were able to go ahead and get to double-digit wins when their quarterback won the Heisman Trophy. And both these squads should have been playoff teams, if not for their defensive informalities. So, what does Lincoln Riley do? What does Brian Kelly do? They go out and they make two of the better hires of the offseason just in general, regardless of position, regardless of what it is. One adds in Blake Baker from Missouri. That was a big reason why the Tigers turned the corner. And one adds in D'Anton Lynn, who, again, I've already made this clear. I think that this is the best hire of the entire offseason. They also still have young quarterbacks that they're implementing. Miller Moss, Garrett Nussmeier. They also have some really good wide receivers. One comes in via Auburn and Jay Fair. One comes in CJ Daniels via Liberty. The defenses are going to be, I think, really telling in this game. And I think that this could be a very high-profile shootout formation. It's going to be in Las Vegas. It's a standalone game on Sunday night. I love those games. Like that is the one time where I will say, okay, I don't really care wherever it's played. Just give me a standalone Sunday night before the NFL season kicks off. And honestly, again, these are two teams that probably are on the outside looking in when it comes to where they are personally in their conference, respectively. They're not guarding a lot of respect. This could carry a lot of respect. And for USC, this may be the feather in the cap to where they're a 9-3 squad and they're saying, okay, well, do we belong in the college football playoff? Well, you did beat LSU, and LSU, again, you're going to be now 0-3 back-to-back-to-back years against major opponents with Brian Kelly leading the charge, who I don't think is that big of a deal, but still, it could be a reason why this sets the tone going into 2024 for both these teams. But number one for me, I think this is number one for a lot of people. It's Texas versus Michigan. I believe if any of these games that we see right now on the list, any one of them is a rematch in the college football playoff. Square number one. This is Exhibit A. This is the one that we will come back to. Because as good as Texas is, they have some question marks. As good as Michigan is, they have some question marks. But also, would it shock you at all if Michigan, once again, with Sharon Moore and this type of persona that has been implemented by Jim Harbaugh, doesn't find their way to the playoff? No, not at all. Texas, would it shock you with all the resources that have been added in over the last few years that they wouldn't find their way to the college football playoff? No. And this is going to be a major test, I think, for both squads because it's still very early on in the season. And this is where aura and I think team chemistry and also culture is going to carry a lot of weight. Like, people are turning out Michigan. And this, to me, is the most disrespected team of the contenders in college football. Because they lost a lot, but they still have Donovan Edwards. You remember him. He's a good running back. So good that he's on the cover of the EA college football game. Colson Loveland didn't go anywhere. They have arguably the best defensive line, headlined by the best defensive player in college football, Mason Graham. They have arguably the best cornerback in college football, Will Johnson. They still have a good aura, and they brought over basically a blitzing machine in Wake Martindale as their new defense coordinator. Like, that's not a roster to where you say, oh, yeah, complete regression. No, maybe not 11-1 or undefeated, but 10-2 is still possible. And then Texas, as good as they are offensively with what they brought in via the portal, their big reason for success last year in the Big 12 was their defensive line. Well, Devondre Sweat's gone. Byron Murphy's gone. You also are hoping that the new guys that are coming on in, Trey Moore, Bill Norton, Colin Simmons, they can add that extra to the squad and be able to give you back the ball to the offense to where Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden, Jonte Cook, Isaiah Bond, the running back tandem of Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter all can hit their stride and be able to put up a lot of points. So this is a game where you're going to see a lot of flaws for both these squads. I think it's going to be back and forth for most of it. And it's also in the big house. It's in the biggest college football stadium. And a lot of people wanted this to be the national championship last year because it would have done wonders for ratings. It would have done excellent for everyone that really want to see two high-profile programs kind of reach the pinnacle of being BACK. Well, now Texas can actually show that they are right there in the conversation of being back. But Michigan, they can show that their culture, even without Jim Harbaugh, is so strong. They didn't really need him last season. It was great that he was on the sideline and he walks off into the sunset. Who has it better than him? Nobody. But we're still in really good hands. We call ourselves Allstate because that's how well we think that we are for 2024. But let me know in the comment section down below, what was the number one non-conference game I didn't mention? What's your number one non-conference game? Make sure that also you hit subscribe and the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode of Just Saying It. Make sure that you're following me on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Mr. Cole Thompson. Tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, college football fanatics everywhere about this channel, because we're on the race to become the number one YouTube program talking about our favorite sport, and I'm on the race to become the number one YouTuber here on college football. And make sure that you also are always emailing me at ColeThompsonWriting@gmail.com if you want to be a part of the Monday Mailbag series. We're back on Monday. I'll see you soon, folks. Later. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. That's awesome. Thank you so much. But before you leave, make sure that you hit subscribe. And if you want to check out any of our other great work, make sure you click on one of the videos here. Am I pointing at the right spot? I'm not entirely sure. I'm really not.